Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Poole, who will be talking to you about creating project management solutions using SharePoint Office 365. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC17. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Richard in the questions window. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. Don't forget to join us in Dublin from the 13th to the 16th of November 2017 for the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Conference. Tickets are selling fast, so book today at sharepointeurope.com to avoid disappointment. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Richard Poole. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Shane.
Okay, we'll see if your screen comes up there. And while that's doing that, Richard, just one quick question for you. Before we get started, if you were to say one thing to someone to convince them to go to the conference, what would you say?
Well, I've been attending the conference certainly for the last 6 years, I believe, and it's certainly evolved over the years to become like the only event really to meet up and share ideas with other like-minded people who are working in the same space, both from the vendor community, but also from the kind of customer base as well. So yeah, I think different people from different industries mixing with each other, sharing ideas and learning from each other, and it's definitely a really good event to attend.
Excellent. Richard, thanks so much. I'll be chatting to you throughout the webinar for the poll, so take it away.
Okay, thanks Shane, and good afternoon everyone. So the focus of today's session really is to look at some of the challenges that are presented really when you're talking about project management and how Harmony can help address those challenges to build a solution together with SharePoint, both SharePoint Online but also SharePoint On-Premise in different environments as well. So just to introduce myself, my name is Richard Poole. I'm the EMEA CTO for Harmony. I look after all the technical pre-sales activity and technical account management of our customers throughout the EMEA region. Obviously work very closely with our R&D as well in terms of product directions and how the product is evolving, and typically it evolves in two main ways. One is by customer demand and customer requirements and things that we can try to address. But also following very closely what Microsoft are doing in terms of implementing new solutions and platforms. They're always obviously adding new components to the Office 365 solution, and seeing where we can kind of bridge the gaps on the technology and the requirements from the business users. So I've been with Harmony now for I think about 6.5 years. And I've been around document management systems for about 17.5 years now. So I've got quite a lot of experience of working with different customers and different industries, and also different companies of different sizes as well, right from small to medium and really large enterprises, right up to enterprises with a few 100,000 users with global solutions. Obviously, over the last 6.5 years based on SharePoint, but also on other platforms previously as well. So let's take a little look at what we're talking about when we say project management, because it really applies to pretty much any industry where the work that is being delivered is built around a project. And obviously you have project managers to oversee everything, and then lots of resources, lots of experts that are brought in at different parts of the project. So, just some examples of industries where, project management plays a key fundamental part. Things like construction, transport industries where, you're developing a new vehicle, a new aircraft, maybe even a new tank or a new ship or whatever. But also things like consultancy, where you're maybe running a project to implement a new initiative or a new area that you're branching out into. And obviously things like utilities and product design kind of fall under the same kind of challenges. And so, we're going to go through some of what are some of those challenges as we go through today's session. So we'd just like to start off with a quick poll question, just to get some audience participation.
Okay, the poll has gone up there, Richard.
Okay, thank you. So just in terms of what we'd like to see a bit of feedback on is, how are you currently managing projects and the documentation and tasks and communication around those projects, if indeed you are looking at project management right now. Are you using things like file shares? Are you using Exchange to manage public folders or shared mailboxes? Are people using things like PST files to manage their content? Or are you using something more bespoke like either SharePoint or Microsoft Project or another project management system?
Okay, so we have our results in, and we have 76% of people using SharePoint.
Excellent. Well, that's a good sign, definitely. And I think, probably most of those people will understand some of the challenges, that presents. And, a lot of those are things that are inherent with any kind of project, that you have key, you spend a lot of time up front with a project, in planning it. And then things evolve and change as the course of the project evolves. And there's lots of unforeseen changes and things as well, which obviously from experience you can build in, a certain amount of, extra room and leeway for those things. But, in terms of like putting together a project plan, you can put in all the key milestones, you can allocate the resources, and then you put together what you believe to be realistic timescales at that point. But as I say, they always change. There could be delays with particular resources not being available when you need them. The milestones might change because certain initiatives or certain key factors have changed. Maybe even things like if it's a construction project, the weather or the time of the year can obviously impact milestones, or there might be some kind of unforeseen challenges that you couldn't have kind of planned for. So, the timescales are always kind of being cut and always being run to a very tight kind of schedule, but also budgets. The whole, obviously, in terms of putting together a project, you need to put the costs against that and the budgets and things, and they're always changing. But something that is constant is that there's always a lot of communication between, obviously, all the members of the project team, but also with the client, with the suppliers, contractors, etc. And obviously, a lot of that is by email. So trying to get that in relation to all the rest of the kind of project information is key. And obviously, email generally resides in Exchange. And you may be using, as we've seen, like 70% of you are using SharePoint to manage, let's say, most probably the project documentation. But often you need to be able to see, who said what and when and why, to see what factors have kind of maybe influenced changes in the project and things. And also, team members can change over time. Some projects are obviously short. They might be a month or 3 months or something. But if you're talking about a big construction project, or let's say an aircraft, the development of that is over many, many years. And it's not only the planning of it, but also the execution of the project and then the maintenance of that project as well. So a lot of those challenges arise from what we've just described. There's lots of documentation involved, going backwards and forwards between different parties. That there's many iterations of those documents, lots of version control and things, and keeping track of all of that can really be a nightmare. It's very difficult for the team members and the management to have a good view on actually where are we at any point in time in a project. And I think to have a complete solution, it really needs to be within the end user's comfort zone. The place where people are spending their time and living and breathing in. And the solution for that really needs to support the entire process, as we said, from kind of project concept through to execution and the whole life cycle of that project. And obviously, project data could come from different places, but also you need to access that data from different devices and different locations. Again, if we take kind of construction as a good example, people on site, they're not generally using a laptop to be accessing documentation. Historically, they would have turned up with a load of rolls of paper under their arm, and already, once those have been drawn or once they've been printed out, they could be out of date. So being able to access those from, let's say, like a tablet or even a smartphone is something that would be a real help to those kind of people. So is SharePoint the best solution to meet all those requirements and challenges? It is. I mean, SharePoint is a great platform, as I'm sure all of you are aware, but there are some challenges there. And it may be, that there's, let's say, that users may have come from a very bespoke document management or very formal document management system where everything has to go through very formal processes and things. And they often have a tight integration to email to work with the communication that's going backwards and forwards and tracking who said what and when. And so SharePoint as a single interface can be challenging to end users because it's something new to them, and it may be not so intuitive. Obviously, you can spend a lot of time and investment and stuff into making SharePoint as easy to use as possible, but end users at the end of the day still prefer or can prefer what they're used to, using file shares, for example, or using email to kind of manage their information. So with Harmony, SharePoint is the correct solution and the correct single platform because it's tightly integrated to where people are spending their time, typically in their email client. In this case, we're going to look at Outlook, but also from other devices as well, like tablets and phones, to be able to interact with SharePoint in an intuitive way so that they can stay productive and stay focused on what they need to actually achieve, but utilize all of the capabilities of the platform that is being made available to them. So things like metadata and content types and stuff can all be logically understood by the end user rather than it being kind of technical kind of jargon that end users can often be a bit baffled by. But also making it nice and seamless to be able to find content and reuse data so that you're not starting from scratch with every new project that you encounter, but actually reusing some of the knowledge and experience that you've had in previous projects. And it may be other projects that your colleagues have been working on, but not necessarily yourself. So being able to find that content and intelligently using it and reusing it is really easy with Harmony. So before we take a look at some scenarios, just a second poll question, please.
Okay, it's going there.
Excellent, thank you, Shane. So yeah, I mean, basically, if you're using SharePoint to manage your projects, but it sounds like the vast majority of you are, what areas of SharePoint are you actually making use of? Your documents, tasks, calendars, contracts or contacts, announcements or custom lists, as just some examples.
I'll share it a bit longer as well this time, Richard. I was a bit short the last time.
That's
so
okay.
Give people another 10 seconds maybe? Okay, very interesting. We have the winner is coming up on documents.
Yep, I thought that might be the case. And I think, a lot of people kind of put SharePoint in, and what it ends up being used as, certainly in the majority, is almost a replacement for a file share. If you are a bit more advanced and you're using some of the more advanced document collaboration mechanisms, content types and metadata and document sets, for example, and views, that's great. But I think a lot of people end up SharePoint being basically a file repository, which is great. It's a great start. But let's see how we can improve on that. So what are the different ways that we can collaborate, both with our clients, with our colleagues, and also our partners or subcontractors and things? So let's take a look at a few different ways that we can capture content, share content, and kind of find content. So the first thing we want to look at is, how do I actually capture some of the information that relates to a particular project? So let's just switch to my Outlook, and hopefully you can see my Outlook interface here. So basically, Harmony in Outlook is a sidebar that you can have minimized or even hidden when it's not being used. And then whenever you actually need to interact with your SharePoint content, you can just simply expand the sidebar, navigate to the areas that you need to use, and start working with it. So Harmony for Outlook is a client-side application. There's no server component that's required or anything, and you can start working, and it supports both on-premise and SharePoint Online instances as well. So if we take an example here of this construction site, sorry if I'm using construction as an example throughout the webinar, but it's quite a good example. So here, if we can see in this particular team site, I've got access to a number of document libraries, but also some lists as well. And we'll take a look at those a little bit later on. But seeing as the vast majority are using SharePoint as a document management system, let's kind of concentrate on that for this kind of first step. So everything is fully security trimmed here, so you only get to see the content that you as the particular user in SharePoint have access to. So for example here, if I go into this document library, you'll see all the document content that I have access to nice and easily there. And Harmony supports all the different, as I said, content types, views that you've got configured there. If you've got document sets or folders and things, they're fully supported as well. And let's just kind of navigate into one of these areas that represents the project that I'm working on. And you'll see that I've already captured a few emails that relate to this particular project. If I change the view there, you'll see that it's actually extracted the information about those emails as well into SharePoint metadata. So things like the subject, the sent date, who they were sent from or to, all that kind of information is automatically being mapped by Harmony. So the user doesn't have to do that. But if we kind of take that as I want to capture some more information. So now I've received this particular email from one of my colleagues that relates to this project that I'm working on. Now, instead of forwarding that email on to lots of people that are just going to end up in their mailboxes, I actually want to store it for future reference because it's maybe got some key information in it. So I can simply drag and drop emails from anywhere in Outlook into the sidebar to capture them into SharePoint. At that point, I can still carry on with my Outlook, so I can be composing some emails at the same time and those kind of things. And here we can see that Harmony's automatically set the content type for this item because it's an email. It's taken the subject of the email as well as the other headers and things as well, but it's also used those headers to create a unique name for this particular item. So if somebody tries to save the same email into the same location, it will prompt that it already exists there. But also, if I've got other emails that have the same subject but were sent from a different person or at a different time, they'll be considered as different items. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, you don't need to be prompted to display that. I've just got that set so that you can see it as part of the demonstration. But if there's required properties and things, they're going to be presented to the user at that time as well. So that's kind of another scenario here where, for example, I've had some further dialogue with this client, and they've actually sent me a document, and I want to capture that document into SharePoint as well. So I'm just going to go back to my kind of standard view there and drag and drop the document that I received. So Harmony supports documents as well as emails, and at this point it's going to prompt me as to what type of document is it. So I've got all the content types that I've got available there. In this case it might be, let's say, a proposal. And then whatever's configured against that content type is going to be presented to the user so that they can fill in the necessary information. And you'll see here it's already brought through any kind of default values, any values that, in this case, it was a Word document, so there were actually some properties in the document that are mapped to some of these columns in SharePoint. But also, we can see anything that's required is highlighted with a red dot next to it. Now, everybody on this webinar today is probably at a different stage in terms of metadata and how much metadata they're using in their organization. Obviously, it could be that you've got quite a lot of optional metadata and just a handful of required properties that you need the user to fill in. So Harmony has a nice option just to filter to show the required properties there, and that just makes it nice and easy for the end user to stay focused on what they actually need to put in. If they want to put in anything additional, then they can simply expand that as and when they need to. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in as a particular type of solution, and you can see that we also support things like managed metadata, enterprise keywords, and things like that as well. So let's go ahead and set that to a particular tag. So now that content's in SharePoint, it's nicely categorized, and it's all as it needs to be. Now, if I then want to actually send this document to somebody else, maybe I've worked on it, so you'll see that I can right-click on my documents and items there, so that I can check in, check out, approve, reject, all those kind of things. I can see the version history. At the moment, there's just a couple of versions of that document. But also, I can preview the content of that item as well. So not only can I preview the document, but I can also preview any emails that we've actually saved as well in the same interface. So it's a nice, easy way to actually confirm what it is I need to send to somebody. So if I need to send this document to maybe a partner or a contractor or something, then let's actually compose a new email. And you'll see that Harmony is available within the body of my email messages as well. So in this instance, maybe I need to send this document to, let's say, Shane. And this is a maybe new contract or something. And I can say, hi Shane, please review. And then I can simply drag and drop items from Harmony into the body of that email to actually share links with my colleagues. Now, when I send that link to Shane, if he clicks on it, it's going to open up from SharePoint. It's a SharePoint link, but it's a nicely formatted link as well. So it's not displaying like the whole path in the body of the email, but it's actually labeled it nicely using the name. You can change that to any other column in SharePoint, so you could use title or you could use document ID or something like that if you wanted to. But obviously, if excuse me, if Shane actually has Harmony, even if he has it closed, if he receives that link, he can simply right-click and say, open that up in Harmony, and then he can take a look at that document without necessarily having to open it up. So he could take a look at the version history, see what's changed about it, check it out, start working on it. But if I'm sending these links, how do I know if somebody has access to it? And that's a real challenge. You know, you can kind of promote people to send links, but then they can often get burnt quite quickly if they're sending links and the recipients don't have access. So with Harmony, when I click send, you'll see that Harmony can analyze those links and check them against the people that I'm sending them to see if they have access to that particular item. In this case, I can see that Shane doesn't have access to my SharePoint environment, so I can choose to grant him either view or edit capabilities and send the link on its way. Or if it's somebody external who I know isn't going to have access to SharePoint, I'm not going to be able to grant them access, but I need to send it as a deliverable item, then I can also add it as an attachment instead. So if I just hold down the Alt key while I drag and drop, the document will then be attached to the email that I then send to Shane. Now, when Shane actually receives that, or makes some changes to it, he might send it back to me as another document, maybe with a different file name. With Harmony, I can drag and drop the attachments that I've received. If I just send that on its way to Shane at the moment. For example, here, the file name has been changed because I sent this to somebody, they made some changes, they haven't finished it yet, but we want to update it in SharePoint. Well, I can simply drag and drop that on top of the existing document, and if I wait for a few seconds, I can actually add it as a new version of the existing document. So it will rename it back to the original file name and add a new version. I get the option there just to obviously update any of the metadata, but you'll see it's brought up the existing properties. And here we can see from the version history that we've just added a new version because the client sent me an updated copy of it. So actually collaborating both internally and externally are different challenges, but with Harmony and SharePoint together, they can become second nature. The next thing is, obviously lots of those things are going to be happening all of the time, and if you're talking about, thousands of people working on a project and there's lots of documentation, lots of updates going backwards and forwards, how do I kind of keep on track with what's been updated and access SharePoint and the SharePoint content from different places? Because, for example, I might need to work on, not only the project documents, but also maybe the project tasks, or maybe I'm working on some documents themselves, and I want to be able to access SharePoint from within the other Office products like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Or maybe I need to capture some content while I'm on my phone, particularly again in that kind of construction project type scenario. You may be on site with no internet connection in a remote location, but you need to capture like some photographs of the state of the site or an incident that you found, or all those kind of things. And being able to do that from that device, even while you're offline, and then for those to be synchronized when you're back online, is a key requirement. So let's just have a look at a couple of those scenarios in this environment again. So if we move beyond documents at the moment and go back to this construction project, you'll see again that I've got access to my other list types. In this case, it could be some project tasks, which is quite common for obviously project management. And you'll see here that I have access to, like we had in my document libraries, I've got access to all the tasks that I've got permission to see. So I could see, for example, any upcoming tasks that are due soon, or tasks that have been assigned to me, all those kind of things. And it's really nice to be able to move between those. I can also add new tasks from here. So without having to go to the web interface, I can create a new task. I can assign it to somebody within my team. I can update or set the priority and all those kind of things, whatever you've got in your kind of environment. But let's just cancel that for a second, because I actually want to take a look at an existing task here that's been maybe assigned to a particular individual. So if I just double click on one of those, you'll see it opens up in the sidebar. So here I can see that there's actually been some documents attached to this task. I can obviously open those up from there just by double clicking on them, but also I can see that actually it hasn't been started yet, and it's assigned to Annie. So it might be that, okay, Annie's not on the project at the moment, or maybe Annie's off ill or something. So I actually want to update that task and assign it to a different user. So I'm going to remove Annie from there and say that I actually want to assign that to, I think Fred is on this project. So let's search for Fred and assign Fred as the project manager or the owner of this task. And then, for example, I can update, let's say, the start date. Let's say it's going to be today, and it's due not today, but maybe by the end of the week. I can then save that. It's added or updated, and you can see that the view is dynamically updated now because it's no longer assigned to me. It's been assigned to Fred in this instance. And as I said, even attaching documents to some of these items as well. So even like, let's say this test procedure here, I need to maybe assign or attach this document to that task. So I can just drag and drop the documents that I receive onto that task, and then now if I go and have a look at the details of the task, you can see that document is attached. So nice and easy, nice and simple for people to stay focused on what they need to do so that they can update those tasks in SharePoint, and they could be affecting different workflows, they could be being combined to update the overall project timescales and things as well. But what I can also do is, as I say, I can access content directly from other applications in the Office suite as well. So if I go into Word, as an example, you'll see that I can open documents from SharePoint or save new documents to SharePoint directly from here. So if I open up click on the Open from SharePoint dialog, I'm then prompted just to connect to SharePoint, which I should already be. And then I can navigate around my SharePoint environment, find the content that I need to open, and work on it directly from there. So you can see here the sites that I'm following. I can see my OneDrive. I can see the libraries and things that we've just been working in. So I can easily navigate around my kind of environment, whether that's sites, libraries, folders, etc. And I can also pin these and things to mark them as favorites. So if we take a look a bit more about favorites, we can then, let's just close that for a second. We can see that Harmony has its own favorites mechanism within the actual product itself. So if I add something as a favorite, and in this case I'm already added this task list, or my tasks in this particular list, it's actually a view, and I can follow that for activity. So what that means is I'm actually going to be notified when there's new updates. And let's just talk about that for a second, because not only could it be a view in a library, it could be a list, it could be a particular individual item, it could be a document set, or anything that I'm following, really. So Harmony has a unified update stream in both the Outlook product that we're looking at the moment, but also the mobile app, which you can see in the screenshot here. which basically brings together all the activity that I'm following and interested in. Now, it might be some updates from Yammer, for example, or it could be updates on some documents or tasks that have been worked on. And as we saw in Outlook, basically, the way I get notified about that, instead of being bombarded by lots of email notifications, we actually notify the user in a more kind of focused and intuitive way. So you'll see a red dot appears on what we call our People tab, but that can be renamed as an Updates tab. And what I have there is actually a number of different areas. I'm not going to go into too much detail on some of those areas, but right now we can see that I'm choosing to follow some of these areas I've marked as favorites. And they, as I say, they could be document libraries, they could be lists or whatever. So I can be notified when there's new activity, when there's new content that's been added or updated, or when somebody has done particular operations. And for example, I can see from here that I can connect to the person, or I can navigate directly to the item that is being updated nice and easily. So I can stay focused but stay informed of what is being changed and modified, and so I can easily manage the areas that I want to see. And those favorites can be used in a number of different ways, because I can use that favorites view actually as my startup view in Harmony as well. So these are all the areas that I'm working in. I've marked as favorites, and I can easily go to any of those just by clicking on them nice and easily. So if I just double click on that Wolf Race Transport location, it'll take me directly there. And if I take a look at the kind of the definition of that favorite, you'll see that I can also, I've got a number of different options around being able to access them offline, being able to use them as Outlook folders, and those kind of things. So we'll look at some of those in a little bit more detail in a minute. Now, one of the things that challenges that I mentioned right at the beginning is, particularly around projects. You know, one project, generally you're not starting from scratch. It's going to be similar in some ways to previous projects that you've done. So why not reuse as much of the knowledge and the data that you can do as a starting point for your new project, rather than starting from scratch every time. So being able to search for content and then copy it and modify it in an easy and intuitive way is a massive benefit. So let's take a look at that. And we can see here, for example, if I click in the top of the Harmony sidebar, it becomes a search bar. And there I can say that whether I want to search just in this library or actually in any of the sites that I'm connected to. So I can do a full enterprise search. And let's say I'm looking for a proposal. So I want to use a previous proposal as a starting point. And it's a full text search, so I can add multiple criteria there. And we can see, for example, I've got maybe a particular document there that I could use as a starting point. So what I can do then is I can copy that document from wherever it is, and if you'll notice if I go backwards and forwards here, it actually goes back to the previous view that I was working in, and then I can choose to paste that document into that library. This is a proposal, so let's set it as one, and then I can update any of the information in that. So again, I can make some easy changes to the document from the last project rather than starting from scratch. Obviously, if you do have templates set in your content types, then you can create a new document directly from here, and it will use your template that's been defined against that content type. So there's a number of different ways to do that. So it's nice and easy to search, find, reuse, copy, paste, even move content from one environment to another. And it could be that you're actually connecting to multiple environments, because it may be that you've currently got some legacy data on premise and you've got new project data on SharePoint Online. So we can see here that I'm actually connected to some on-premise sites as well as some Office 365 sites, and I can copy and move content between them nice and easily just by using those kind of contextual menus and even keyboard shortcuts that everyone's familiar with, like Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. Now, I think particularly around project management, there's a number of different components of Office 365, particularly that you can utilize at different parts of the project and for different reasons. I mean, for example, OneDrive I would typically use for, it's my personal documents, and it might be while I've got some ideas and I'm putting together a draft of something, I'll be storing it in my OneDrive, and then at some point when I want to share that with maybe a review group or something, we might set up a team or a group in Office 365, and then I can actually put the content in there, share it with the group or the team, and then at some point when we actually progress to implementing the project, it needs to go into SharePoint in the team site. So being able to access all of those 3 or 4 components in one interface, as we do in Harmony, makes that really intuitive and easy to use, because I think a lot of people are confused as to when do I use OneDrive, when do I use a team, when do I use a SharePoint site. So as an example here, I can go to my OneDrive, I can say, okay, I've got a particular document, let's say this PowerPoint presentation, that I now want to copy from my OneDrive and then put it into a group that I'm a member of. So just by clicking on groups here, we can actually return all the groups or teams that you're a member of. So we can see here, for example, I've got an EMEA or technical sales team, and I can see the files that are associated with that team and shared with that team. So here I can easily just go in and let's say I want to put it into a particular folder that we've got there. And just using a keyboard shortcut like I did there, Control-V, or I could have right-clicked and pasted, you'll see that that document is now going to be pasted into this team site or this group and be shared with the other members of that group or that team. Again, maybe a bit further down the line, maybe there's been some changes. I've worked on that document, served some of my team members. I now actually want to put that into SharePoint. So I can then take that from the team and put it into the team site that I'm working on here as well, and then set the content type as we saw before. I'm just going to put that in as a document in this case, and you'll see that there's obviously the metadata corresponds to whatever is defined in your particular library and content types. So I'm just going to fill in the required properties there. Let's say who the owner is. And save that. So throughout the life cycle of the project, Harmony can really help end users to utilize the best parts of Office 365 in the best possible way in an environment that's comfortable to them. Obviously, at any point in time, if I need to get to the library in a browser, I can just right-click and say open that in a browser, and it will take me directly to that view in that library. So, Harmony isn't replacing the SharePoint UI; it's complementing it, and it's making it a lot more accessible. So, just on that note, our third and final poll question.
Coming up now.
So just a question of are you familiar or are you using Harmony today? Yes or no, or would you be interested in trying it out?
Okay, we'll just give people another 10 seconds on this. Okay, so we'll close the poll. And the winner is no, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I'll share that with you now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, hopefully people have learned a bit today that Harmony could definitely help them to collaborate around their project management a little bit better, and get everybody using SharePoint on a daily basis. Okay.
Great stuff, Richard. Thank you very much. Is that the end of your presentation?
It is, yep, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. We have some questions in for you and some comments, so I'll just start going through them now if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
First question is, what versions of SharePoint are supported?
Okay, so I mean, from a SharePoint point of view, as I mentioned before, we do support both on-premise and SharePoint Online. And on the on-premise side, anything basically from WSS3, for anybody who can remember that, upwards, so through SharePoint 2010, 2013, and 2016. And as I say, any kind of mixture of those as well. So if you still have some legacy information in older systems, you can still use Harmony alongside your kind of current platform as well.
Great. Do you support hybrid environments?
Yeah, because I mean those sites could be from different environments, so it might be that your SharePoint is on premise, but maybe your Exchange is online. So you could, because Harmony is really using Outlook as a container for a UI, but it's connecting to SharePoint using standard SharePoint web services. We don't actually do anything directly with Exchange, so it doesn't matter if your Exchange is online or on premise. It's down to the kind of SharePoint side. But even there, you could have that kind of hybrid environment of, maybe your confidential data needs to be on premise, but your let's say less confidential information might be in the cloud, or vice versa. It really depends on your kind of environment. But Harmony connects to them in exactly the same way, and it uses the standard SharePoint web services to pick up the user profile service, for example, the search service, the taxonomy services. So everything really is controlled in SharePoint, but just accessed from Harmony as a front end to it.
Okay, cool. What happened when someone sends you another version of the same document in another email attachment? How do you update the SharePoint library with the updated document that you just received with a later version without having duplicate files from the same in SharePoint? So I think that's in relation to the demo that you were doing where you sent me the file.
Yeah, exactly. So in that instance, obviously the unique identifier in a library is the file name. But as I demonstrated, even if a file name has changed, if it's the same document, same file name, obviously I can just drag that in. I'll be prompted that that document already exists, but I can choose to add it as a new version or add it as a new document. So in this case, maybe I want to add it as a new version without me having to really make any changes to it. And obviously that will then maintain the version history. But even if the file name has changed, then we can actually, as I showed, if you just drag that new document with a different file name on top of an existing one, you can then choose to add that as a new version as well. There's a number of other different ways you can add versions. So if you just right-click on a document and say that I want to add a new version, I can then browse to the new version of the document that I want to add, and that will be renamed as well. Okay. So throughout all the kind of processes, you can actually rename stuff automatically as well as manually. Okay,
the person has just wrote back, wow, that was very impressive. So there you go. I think you've answered that question. Thanks.
Excellent.
Search for a specific item. How do you do that if it can be mentioned in an email list or document? Excuse me.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, I think they're on about in relation to search. So search for a specific item. How do you do that if it is mentioned in an email list or document?
Okay, so I mean, obviously, when I do my search here, the default scope of that search, as I say, is just this library. Now, in this case, it's actually going to show me some documents. Those documents could be, there's where that keyword is actually displayed or found. It's coming back from the SharePoint indexing service, basically. So whatever it is going to be indexed and returned, and it could be, like in this case, there's an email where that word has been found within either the email, or it could even be within the attachment of the email, because in Microsoft Indexing Server there are things called iFilters, so you can add like MSG iFilters and other native iFilters as well, so that attachments actually get indexed and returned based on your search. But essentially, as I say, Harmony is using the enterprise search service of SharePoint. So whatever SharePoint would return is what Harmony actually displays.
Okay, great. How do I add Harmony to Outlook?
Okay, good question. So it is very nice and simple. We like to keep things simple both on the UI but also from the deployment side as well. So it's just a client-side application. It's delivered as a standard MSI package. So you typically, most of our customers will push that out to the end users using something like SCCM to obviously manage the installation of the plugin. And then everything that you see in Harmony, like for example, the sites that you start off with, or the options that you've got in Harmony, can all be configured via registry keys, and they can be locked down, they can be pre-configured, they can be bundled into the MSI package, or they can be managed separately via like group policy or whatever. So you could have different settings for different groups of users. But just as an example here, you'll see I've got some of the options grayed out here, like use unique names when I'm saving emails. So I've predefined that via a registry key, and I've locked it down via a registry key as well. So just as an example, sorry to get a little bit technical during this session, but we can see here that I've got an option just to say that I want to use unique email names. So I've set that to true, and obviously from an admin point of view I've set it to true. And I've created a force key so it's locked. That way the end user can't change it, you get consistent experience across all your users, and you can control that nice and easily. And it's always dynamic and things as well. So, yeah, for example, if you want to show groups, then that's an option just to enable and force. If you want to see the sites that you're following or your OneDrive. And obviously the OneDrive option here is nice because it means that you can actually push that out to all users, push the main site that they're connecting to, which is the same site for everybody, but then their OneDrive is specific to them. So they don't have to add that themselves, and you're not having to push out different settings to different individuals. But because I'm authenticated as a particular user here, when I click on OneDrive, I get my OneDrive. But if I log in, even on the same machine, as a different person, then I'd get that user's OneDrive instead. So it's very nice and easy to manage.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next question is it possible to use Harmony to search in PDFs and images?
Yeah, absolutely. They could be, as I say, indexed according to your indexing service in SharePoint. Also, when you return those items, the preview that we have here does also preview images and PDFs as well. So, for example, here I've got a PDF of a drawing plan. I may even have some images here as well if I scroll down a bit further. No, I haven't, but actually that's my OneDrive. So let's take a look at the construction site that we were working in before. And you can see here, yes, I've got some images as well. So I can even preview those in the same interface.
Excellent. That's brilliant. Richard, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
That's okay. Thank you for everybody's attendance and hopefully attentive viewing as well.
Brilliant. And we'll see you in about 3 weeks in Dublin.
Yeah, excellent. I look forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Richard. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Cheers.
Okay, everybody. I'll just take back this for a moment. Okay, so that is it for now. Join us for our next webinar on Thursday, November 30th, 2017 at 1 p.m. CET, where Danny Jess, Senior SharePoint Developer at Fulcrum, USA, will present on Apply Consistent UI Customizations across classic and modern SharePoint Pages 365. Register at sharepointeurope.com/register-for-webinars. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Take care and goodbye.